Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. It's good to see everybody. It's also very good to see that nobody immediately got up and left when we did that chant on aging, sickness, and death, and separation. It's like each step is like a, more just laying on the bricks. I thought about making a joke that was like the Buddhist Jingle Bell Rock, but didn't want to mention that song before the meditation, because one practice which is interesting that you can do in meditation or just in daily life is tracking things back to their source, taking things back to their source. And an instance of how you could do this, if you're in meditation and you're trying to stay with the breath or a feeling in a certain part of the body, is when you notice that you're not with that anymore, just actually note, where are you? What are you thinking about? And how did you get there? So, okay, I might be thinking about whatever, lunch, and then why am I thinking about lunch? Because I had a particular smell. I smelled something, or I saw food, and just tracking thoughts back. And then when you get to that contact point, then it can just bring awareness back to, back to zero, or back to one, back to your object. Say, oh, I just got pulled along very systematically from one thought to the next. I had an interesting case of this week. Some people who came to offer alms may have picked up on it, but for some reason I couldn't quite figure out. Towards the latter part of this week, I just started thinking about and found myself talking about wombs and thinking about wombs. And I ended up calling my mother. She's a OBGYN, so she's professional at knowing about wombs, certainly more than me. And ended up calling her twice to ask about wombs, and kind of taking this back, like, what? God, aren't you supposed to be thinking about something else? Like, not wombs? It's always funny with my mom. She's being a gynecologist. I always sometimes joke with her that, we've got like opposite professions, that she's involved with birth and I'm involved with, putting it into birth. So that's a Buddhist joke. If you don't get it, if it sounds scary, don't worry, it shouldn't be. Trace back, what was it? Why am I thinking about wombs? And two streams of thought from earlier in the week. One of them being this ongoing book project that I'm doing. It's a project called Paths to Pamoja, or Paths of Gladness. And I'm tracing every instance in the Pali Canon when the Buddha talks about this whole string of causality, the causality of how from doing one thing that leads to gladness, and from gladness that leads to joy, from joy to bodily tranquility, from bodily tranquility to happiness, from happiness to samadhi or mental collectedness, to seeing things as they are, to dispassion, disenchantment, dispassion, and then liberation. And this sequence of 9 things in one place is called the Yoniso-Manasikāra Mulaka Dhammas, which means those 9 dhammas, those 9 qualities, which are rooted in Yoniso-Manasikāra, which literally means turning the mind back to the yoni, turning the mind back to the yoni. And yoni, in English, as in Pali, it means the womb. It means the womb. Usually this term Yoniso-Manasikāra is translated as, say, skillful awareness, wise attention, but it literally means turning attention back to the womb. So I've been really thinking about this, and it's been a big part of my practice. What does that mean, that gladness is rooted in turning the mind back to this source? And then just last Sunday, the second stream that got me thinking about wombs on this topic was just going to Fauntleroy Church, and we sat, a number of us from this community went to their church service and sang a bunch of Christmas songs. And it turns out that in addition to being about Santa and reindeers and presents, that Christmas is about the birth of Christ. So this is the season for birth, and that got me thinking about analogs or relationships. What is the Buddha's birth story? And so these things coming together has really coalesced in me. Finding this quite fascinating. So before getting any more heady, I thought to just invite everyone for the rest of this talk, and really, if you're so inclined, for the rest of your life or whatever, is really just keeping, hopefully, anyone who is experimenting with it, that during the meditation, bringing the mind lower. Just, it sometimes feels like we're attached, like there's something that the brain or the mind is just looking out through the eyes. But we don't have to know from behind the eyes. We can really drop attention, and letting attention drop to lower down, lower through the heart, past the heart, into this, that golden furnace. And just invite, would it be possible while attending a lecture, while listening to a Dhamma talk, to just stay in this much more embodied, more earthy, more grounded space? And what would that be like? Can you receive whatever the teaching is about, almost as if Wi-Fi, the brain, sends the teaching down into the lower belly, into this yoni area, this lower place of awareness. So just invite everybody to stay in this space. And this is it's not just a new practice. It's mentioned in many different cultures. You've got, in Chinese tradition, you've got the dantian. This is the xia dantian. This is the lower dantian, or it's called the sea of qi. The sea of qi. The sea of qi. Just bringing attention down there. And knowing from this elixir of life, this area of knowing. In Japanese tradition, it's called the hara. In Pali, the belly, this whole region, is actually called the udara. We chant it in the 32 parts as udarayang, the contents of the stomachs. And this word udara is cognate. Pali is related to Sanskrit, is related to Latin. They're both Proto-Indo-European languages. Udara, can anybody guess what udara is related to in English? Udders and the uterus, exactly, yeah. So bringing the mind to this lower belly, to this yoni space, and letting it, just staying there, and knowing from this space. So the quality of Yoniso-Manasikāra, or turning the mind back to the yoni, wise attention, skillful attention, thorough awareness, or as my friend Bhante Suhajo will call it, is radical awareness. And like Yoniso-Manasikāra, this radical has the same root as radishes and roots. It's literally the radical, that which takes you back to the source. So this radical awareness, wise attention, it's a very, it's not talked about enough in American Buddhist circles, but it's so primary. It's one of the factors, one of the main 4 factors of stream entry. So one of the Buddhist, basically real insight and awakening stages is brought about through 2 internal factors and 2 external factors. The external factors are hearing the voice of another and having good friends. And the internal factors are Yoniso-Manasikāra, turning the mind to the yoni, dropping awareness down, wise attention, and practicing the Dhamma in line with the Dhamma. So it's a very important quality. It's often talked about as when you are able to devote this wise attention, Yoniso-Manasikāra, you know how to feed wholesome mind states, and you know how to not feed unwholesome mind states. So there's a whole sutta called food, basically, nutriment, which talks about turning the attention, using attention wisely, bringing attention back to this source, and knowing how to encourage mind states like mindfulness and clear comprehension and rapture and the 7 factors of awakening, and realizing the source of unwholesome mind states like sensual desire, sensual obsession, ill will, restlessness, anxiety, sloth and torpor, and doubt. And you see the source, you see the causality, Yoniso-Manasikāra, that which sees causality. And this is a really extremely important thing to be cultivating, both on an intellectual level, learning and looking and investigating just mentally, what exactly is it? What am I doing with my mind? What was I doing with my mind before I got to this place of being totally overwhelmed with restlessness? What was I doing before I got to this place of just very pure mental spaciousness? What was I doing? Who was I talking to? What was I listening to? What was I doing with the mind? Looking at the causality of your wholesome and unwholesome mind states. I think another interesting relationship, again, with this imagery of the womb, of the belly, is a term which you don't find in the Pali tradition and the Theravada tradition, but is huge in the Mahayana of Tathāgata-Garbha. Tathāgata-Garbha. Garbha is another word for womb. And it's literally the womb or the matrix of the Tathāgatas, of the awakened ones. And this term Tathāgata-Garbha is basically, it's not so much about womb as the source, but almost a universal womb. Tathāgata-Garbha is that expansive Buddha nature, Buddha awareness, which is inclusive of everything. So womb as the source and womb as everything. Tathāgata-Garbha, Yoniso-Manasikāra. It's fascinating, the language behind these, and seeing how they might relate to one another. So encourage everybody to experiment. And this, I have found, this is not at all a orthodox way of appreciating or understanding this term Yoniso-Manasikāra, but the physicality of it and the spaciousness of it, of actually knowing from a place deeper in the body, knowing from a center in the body, a centerless center with a circumference, with a surface that is everywhere. So a sphere with a center that is nowhere, and a circumference, a surface that is everywhere. Experimenting with that awareness, this turning of the mind back to that spacious awareness, which is also embodied. Spacious awareness, which is also embodied. And anytime why learning Pali terms can be great is because certainly a term like sati or mindfulness, you read it in English and pretty much everybody translates sati as mindfulness. But Yoniso-Manasikāra, nobody translates it the same. You've got all these different translations. There's even logical knowing or reasoned appreciation of phenomena, or some, 5-6 word long explanation of what this concept means. But if you see it occurs over and over and over again, Yoniso-Manasikāra, that which turns the mind back to this expansive knowing from a source, knowing from the source, knowing the causality of things. And just seeing, might that fit? Might that be a cause for stream entry? Might that be a cause for awakening? So experiment, learn this Pali term, yoni. Hopefully you can memorize that, because it's an English word too. Yoni, the womb. Manasikāra, mana, is like the English word mind. Manas is mind. Kara is like karma, the action of the mind, which goes to the yoni, Yoniso-Manasikāra. That second stream of just the Buddha's birth story, it's fascinating, and it points to what is faith? What is faith in a Buddhist context? What is faith in a Buddhist context? It's very different from how most people, most Christians understand faith in a popular Christian conception, is that you either believe in the virgin birth of Jesus and that Jesus was God, born to Mary the Virgin, or that's the basis of faith. And if you just can't get your mind around that, then it closes a lot of doors. It might even close the door to heaven, the biggest and the best door in that system. But in Buddhist context, it's a very different system. Faith is a very different thing. And even scripture. So how do you read scripture in a Buddhist context? Fortunately, in a Theravada context, the Pali canon is awesome, and it's so easy to read for modern people. There's just not a lot of religiosity, hocus pocus, hard to get your mind around, superstitious mumbo jumbo. Or at least, if it seems like there are, and I'm going to mention some places where you might question, like, really? Still, the parts of the canon that you read, like, really, did that really happen? Are there really these things? That's not the basis of faith. So I'll just cut to the chase. The basis of faith in a Buddhist context is this primary awareness of an appreciation, a belief that it is possible to cultivate wholesome mind states, and it is possible to let go of unwholesome mind states. You've got to take a stance on that. You're operating from if you don't have a position on that it either is possible or it's not possible, you're unconsciously operating from one of those two assumptions, that you do have agency, or you do have action, karma does have fruit, or it doesn't. And either life is totally random, or you have some influence on the course of your life stream. So that's the basis of Buddhist faith. So giving that, cutting that chase, gives some of the wonderful and marvelous situations, occurrences, descriptions of the Buddha's birth scene. So these come up, appropriately enough, in a sutta that's called The Wonderful and the Marvelous, in the Majjhima Nikaya, the Middle Length Discourses, sutta number 123. So in this discourse, you've got a group of monks, monks, sitting around like we sometimes do. And the monks are talking like, the Buddha, he's so wonderful and marvelous. He could say in the past there were these other Buddhas, and they had this name, and they did all this, and they did that, and basically just praising the Buddha, as monks we sometimes do when we get together. And then Ananda, the Buddha's main attendant, comes along, and he hears this, and he says, you're totally right. The Buddha is wonderful and marvelous. The Buddha he's really, really good. He's just great. He's great. And then the Buddha comes along and, kind of knocks on the door, doesn't totally want to gate crash, these monks kind of just talking amongst themselves, and lets himself in, and they all, of course, become quiet. And the Buddha says, you probably had some idea, but he says, what was the course of talk that you were speaking about when I knocked on the door and came in? And Ananda related these stories. He says, Lord, we were talking in this vein. So all of these things, basically the stories around the Buddha's birth, are voiced in the voice of Ananda. So this is not necessarily the Buddha speaking, but he says, I heard this. And he talks about all sorts of wonderful and marvelous situations around the Buddha's birth, like the Buddha, when he entered his mother's womb, Maya Gotami was his mother's name. When he entered Maya Gotami's womb, she experienced no pain. When he entered his mother's womb, she could actually see him in her womb. When he was born, there was an immeasurable light which went through multiple universe systems. And there's a little interesting kind of cute line that this universal light streamed out through multiple universes, and then even the interstices, the spaces between universes, which are super dark usually, even those got lit up. And it said in the sutta that the beings there, once they could see, they look around and see there are other beings. And this, they say, in quotes, whoa, I didn't realize there were other people here, which is cute. So that's another wonderful and marvelous instance that when the Buddha was born, this light just shined through multiple universes. And the Buddha, he was inside his mother's womb for 10 months exactly. And when he was born, he was born to Maya when she was standing up. And when he was born, he was caught by devas, and they presented him to his mother. And then he stood on the ground, and then he walked 7 steps, and he looked in the 4 directions, and he put his finger up, like if you've ever seen some of these statues of a little baby Buddha-like being with their finger up like this. This is the baby Buddha. When he says this, I am the foremost, I am the supreme, this is my last birth, there will be no more coming into being. Amazing, yeah, like wonderful and marvelous, wonderful and marvelous. But what do you do? What do you do with stories like this? When you came into Buddhism, because you like to meditate, you know, it's just a whole nother world. I left Christianity because there were all these things I couldn't get down with. So what do I do with stories like this? And so this is one of the reasons I called my mom, is to get some perspective on, like, are these things possible? And the reason I called her twice was the first time I called her was to prepare her, just to say, Mom, I'm not going to ask you these questions tomorrow, but tomorrow I'm going to call you and I'm going to ask you some wonderful and marvelous questions that you'll think that your son has completely gone insane about. So please prepare yourself and know that your son is still trying to be rational and hasn't totally drunk the Buddhist Kool-Aid and is still trying to think rightly. So I prepared her, and then the next day I called and said, Mom, is it possible that a woman, is there any instance of people being pregnant having a higher threshold for pain? And she said, actually, yeah, there are studies that point to that. And there are studies that show, there's one just from 2022, which shows that people who are pregnant in comparison to women who aren't pregnant have more optimism, less, So there's some case studies, which my mom is into. I like as well, scientific studies, science, great. Mom, I like it. Is it possible that someone could be inside their mother's womb for 10 months? And she said, yeah, totally, within normal limits. We say a woman, keeps a baby usually for 37 to 42 weeks. 40 weeks, 10 months, totally within normal limits. So, still in my mom's good books. Is it possible that a woman, when they gave birth, could do it standing up? And she said, yeah, usually we don't do that, but it's possible. It could definitely happen. And so I'm still okay with my mom. And then, is it possible, Mom, that a baby, once they're born, could stand up, and walk 7 steps? And she's like, no, Kovilo, it's just not going to happen. I think we've been on the phone for like 20 minutes by then, and she's kind of getting, fed up. And she's okay, no, not going to happen. And then I still had the momentum. So what about, is it possible they could hold their finger up and say, this is my last birth, I'm the best of all being. And yeah, that was pretty much, I think the phone call ended like 2.5 minutes after that. But she still loves me. I still love my mom. But fortunately, we don't have to believe these things. Is it possible? Is it possible? Some of these things are within normal limits. Some of them outside of normal limits. Is it possible that they happened? Maybe. I did watch a YouTube video about a little baby who said, YouTube video of a 4-day-old who says, hello. This is a bit more of a stretch. I hear stories in Thailand about, this is actually from Ajahn talking about a student of his, and he says that she heard that when she had her friend, when she had a baby, the baby, as soon as it came out, said, oh no, not again. In Thai. Oh, siadai. Something like that. Who knows? Is it possible? Is it also possible that these stories have been elaborated on by, in the words of a Western scholar, monkish gloss? Is it possible that monks added this in later because they wanted people to think that their Buddha was a god? Totally possible. But on one level, it's very easy. I feel very fortunate, and I think many Western monks and people who come to Buddhism because we see the benefits of Buddhism, of meditation, of these mind trainings on the mind. Training in bringing the mind back to a simple object, learning how to direct awareness, learning the benefits of generosity and keeping precepts. And you say, oh, there is truth, absolute truth to all these things. I see them in my life. These other things, yeah, I can say maybe, maybe not. And it doesn't matter that much because I'm starting to have this faith that there is fruit and result to good and bad action. It is possible to abandon unwholesome actions. It is possible to cultivate wholesome actions. So you can read discourses like that. If you come up to something in the text that talk about devas, these heavenly realms, and you don't have to automatically think, even if there's a knee-jerk reaction like, nope, fake, you can say, that's totally fine first reaction. For myself, it's kind of like, I don't have this knee-jerk reaction. These suttas, I've had enough interaction with good discourses that it's kind of allowed me to read suttas and say, when I read something that seems too wonderful, too marvelous, I say, okay, maybe, maybe not. I just don't have to pick that up right now. And that's totally fine because the practice is working for me now. So yeah, just encourage people to approach faith, the faith in awakening, the faith in Buddha, this knowing. That's the womb of faith in Buddhism, is just awareness itself, and just it is possible to cultivate the mind. And learning about Yoniso-Manasikāra, the mind which turns back to the yoni, the mind which is Tathāgata-Garbha, which is the full awareness of everything, no limits. And yeah, just encourage people to experiment with dropping your awareness down lower than just the brain, because there's a lot of wisdom to be had there. So leave the talk there and open things up to questions.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
Okay, so we can take questions from people live, or if anyone has any questions on the Zoom chat, you can raise your the little hand there so we can see. And we've got a mic here. I think Gary has the mic and can pass it to people if you've got questions. So Kate?
Namaskaran, Ajahn. I'm glad that you are writing a book on pamoja, because I have question on that. And it is interesting that you said pamoja comes first, and then we develop the Dharma, and then piti and sukha. Because from my understanding, from Anapanasati 16 steps, piti and sukha comes first, and then gladdening the mind comes in the third tetrad. And Bhante Analayo said, pamoja is the happiness deeply within, sort of deeper than the joy that happening earlier. So it was very interesting to me of how you interpret that. And I mean, I don't understand these things very well, so just want to hear clarification from you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Yeah, there are lots of words that have this root mud in them. So you've got mudu, which literally means soft. That's mud, the root means softening. And pamoja means like gladness or well-being. The word in the third tetrad of the Anapanasati is abhipamodayang, which is a slightly different word. So abhi is taking it to another level. So it's really calming the mind, really calming the mind. So different words also. Anumodana, when we say that, that also comes from mudu. It's leaning your softness into others, appreciating other people's goodness. Or mudita, this delighting in other people's goodness. So in this string that I'm talking about, pamoja always comes pamojang, pamuditasa piti jayati. So for one who experiences pamoja, piti arises. And it comes up like again and again, like 200 times. And so what the book will do is pull all of these disparate discourses into one place. But that's the pattern. Yeah, so from pamoja, gladness, it leads to piti, leads to passaddhi, leads to sukha, leads to samadhi. But the precursor to gladness, or pamojang, is Yoniso-Manasikāra. So for one, turning the mind, this is the fascinating part, and to look at for yourself. For one, turning the mind to the yoni. For one, paying attention carefully, paying attention thoroughly. For one, paying attention to the yoni, gladness arises. It's like a natural thing. So experiment with that. Is that true? That when you're able to come from this yoni space, that gladness can arise. Yeah, and then piti, etc.
Thank you, Ajahn. What is the Pali word for the one in the third tetrad again?
Abhipamodayang.
Okay.
Abhipamodayang.
Okay, thank you.
And just to say, I think Ajahn Kovilo was probably going to bring it around to this as well. But the two streams which he spoke about in terms of the brightening, coming back to the source of awareness, and then brightening, looking to these amazing and marvelous qualities of the Buddha's birth. The Buddha himself, in that same sutta, brings those two streams together and grounds things in practice. And do you want to speak to that? Okay. So basically, Venerable Ananda's regaling the Buddha with his own tale of marvelous qualities. And then at the end, the Buddha says, there's one other amazing and marvelous quality of the Tathāgata, Venerable Ananda. And Venerable Ananda says, what is that, Lord? And he says, the Tathāgata knows feelings as they arise, as they remain, and as they pass away. He knows perceptions as they arise, as they remain, and as they pass away. He knows thoughts as they arise, as they remain, as they pass away. That's the Buddha's ending of the whole line of wonderful and marvelous qualities, is pointing back to just this womb of attention that holds all experience. And it's to look back on texts that are 2,500 years old and see a teacher with such restraint, where his disciples are, and yes, these may be hagiographical. There's certainly places in the suttas with later interpolation, etc. Like Ajahn Kovilo says, we don't have to believe in this. But to watch a teacher rein it all back to the handful of leaves and say, just know, attention in this moment is, what a body of teachings we have in that. So I don't know what your mom said about that part completely.
I'll have to call her again. Yeah. Yeah, but total mic drop on the Buddha's part. He just, okay, maybe so, but boom. Yeah. Steve? Oh.
Let's see, I'm sort of on thin ice here, but I usually am. It's part of what you were dancing through was sort of what's apparent and what's not apparent, or what may be, or something. And I was wondering, in terms of, in sort of on the path, two things sometimes happen. One thing is that crazy stuff emerges in our minds during practice, and is like, where'd that come from? That whole phenomena. And then secondly, crazy stuff happens in people's lives, like, why is this happening? And that whole thing, trying to make sense of it. And so in terms of rebirth, I don't know, but I'm sort of like inclined, but what I'm asking is, I sometimes use like almost the possibility of rebirth or the view of rebirth as a way to sort through those things, even though I don't know it's true. But it's a way to sort through those things, like maybe it comes from some other thing, and just see how that helps sort through it, even though I'm not convinced it's true. You know what I mean? Just as a tool. And I wonder if you could comment on that, because I've sort of danced through that, and I'd like to hear any feedback, if that makes sense.
That's great. What else can you do? You can't force yourself to believe anything. So yeah, using it as a working hypothesis or a possibility is great. One of the reasons that I suggested that we chant that Buddhist Jingle Bell Rock is because one of the lines in there is Kama Sakomi Kama Dayado Kama Yoni. Amhi Kama Yoni, which is translated in that chant as I am born from my actions. But it literally means I have Kama as my yoni. I have Kama as my womb. Kama is what leads to birth. Kama comes from this yoni. Kama comes from and is, there's this relationship. And the grammar and syntax actually, it can be read both ways. That, Kama gives rise to yoni. So Kama gives rise to birth and rebirth. And that's when you follow out the implications of Kama in this life, then rebirth is suggested. But it can also be that Kama has birth as its yoni. So we have all these past conditions. Aging, sickness, death, which we talked about, is all precursed by birth and possibly previous births. So touching on the subject.
Oh, that's it.
Yes, and I think in terms of navigating these parts of the teaching which seem extraordinary, this was something that got brought up in the Buddha's time too, and most famously in the Kalama Sutta, where the Buddha comes to a town of Kalamas and they say, there's been many teachers here, they teach all these different things, some teach rebirth, some don't. And instead of saying, I'm the right teacher, you should believe in me, the Buddha, with this characteristic just nuance, says, it is correct that you are in doubt. This is a doubtful matter. And then he goes on to say, what do you think? When you act out of greed, hatred, and delusion, these wholesome states, does it lead to happiness or suffering? And they say, happiness. Wait, no, unhappiness. Sorry. Let's get this right. Clear Mountain implodes in one. And the opposite. And that's very useful, and that's what's quoted often with feel how these actions, like Ajahn Kovilo is saying, of working with these teachings, give you faith over time in your own practice and in the teachings. And then what he says and goes on, and this is the part that's not quoted, is he says, what is praised and censured by the wise. So we don't always have a good internal compass, and we know that. So also referencing what do the wise people say in our lives, and using that to steer by. And then this third part very often gets looked over, and then he tells them to develop loving kindness. And there's a simplicity to the mind state of love and metta, which is it's like a mirror, it's so smooth, that if you stay in that place and ask yourself a question about life from there, there's this clarity that emerges. And then finally, he says, basically, this is the double, I believe it's called the double bet, which means you can't for sure say that there is no rebirth. Occam's razor doesn't say we have what we see and there's nothing else. Occam's razor says there is what we see, period. As to what else there is, who knows? So what he's saying is, if there is no rebirth, then act well and you'll live a beautiful life. If there is rebirth, which you can't for sure say there's not, then you'll go to a good place of happiness. And there's no downside. Like you said, if you use that as a lens, all it makes you do is take every one of your actions with utmost seriousness, and that just leads to a beauty in the heart that is untouchable. My dad used to tell me that there's a philosopher he knew who said you should live as if today was the last day of your life and as if you would live forever. And I've always thought rebirth held like that gives a strange vision of that somewhat.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll just say one other thing is sometimes when we're caught in angst, it seems like we get caught in a polarized understanding of what we think it is or isn't. And I've developed, maybe not faith, confidence. I like the word confidence. I developed confidence that if we keep in practice, like boundlessly opening our minds, leaning into whatever it is without any definitions, then we thought it was A and B, but it turns out it's, H. Some whole new understanding pops up and that's part of the beauty of the practice, is it lets things sort out in ways that we wouldn't see if we thought of it logically or within the limited perspective that we now have. So it kind of all fits in with what you were just saying, in a way.
Just to note, there's an analogy for that type of insight in the suttas, where the Buddha was caught in the binary of pleasure in the world versus pain and asceticism. And then many of you'll know this moment when he thinks back to when he was a child. He's sort of tortured himself to starvation. And he thinks back to sitting under this rose apple tree and this moment where he slips into first jhana as a kid. And just this voice arises. And the first person pronoun is absent from that verse. It's not I thought, it's knowledge. The question arose, is this the path to, am I afraid of this pleasure? And the answer arose, I am not afraid of that pleasure. Is this the path to awakening? This is the path to awakening. So just how in those deeper moments when the binaries let go of, something else comes from an impersonal place, and how it came from his childhood. There's something about that original tracing back to near the yoni that has that wisdom in it. I think there's a lot there. Yeah, that sounds good.
Sarah?
Yeah, I had a little question. You were talking about etymology and mudu, softening. And mudita has been one of the kind of more, I haven't found very many interesting translations of it. And, I was wondering if you could give a little constellation. Sometimes it's gladness and other people's joy. Sometimes it's gladness, might be rejoicing. I was wondering if you could, how that relates, is that mudita related to mudu, softening?
Yeah, great question. I mean, in the chanting book, they translate mudita as gladness. Yeah. And you can conceive of it just as joy. I mean, there are many times when it talks about meditators practicing by themselves at the foot of a tree, practicing mudita, they're just delighting. It's just joy is coming up, this kind of infinite joy. It is, all of these mud words are quite useful. There is an English word called compersion, Compersion, which basically means mudita, but just nobody knows the word compersion. So mudita's better. Yeah.
Is it related to softening, mudu? Is mudita related?
Actually, I don't know the English etymology of compersion, but mudita. Yeah, mudita is definitely related to, it's the same root. Yeah, the softening and
Okay.
How that relates, softening into others or letting other people, into your heart in a soft kind of soft way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Zoom, I can't see who that is. Is that Hasa? Hasa Chitto? Okay.
Yes, it is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Speaking of mudita, I like your new Buddha Rupa. It's growing. It's larger. So as Clear Mountain grows, I'm happy. But my question actually, or I don't know if this is a question or a comment or kind of just a request for further clarification. I really appreciate the conversation about doubt and some of these topics in the teachings. I recently stumbled across the sutta about cloud devas and the weather that brought a lot of difficulty to me, where someone asks the Buddha, well, why is there sometimes cold weather and why is there sometimes hot weather? And the Buddha says, it's because there are angels rejoicing. And for me, this really challenges me because, I believe in, high pressure systems and low pressure systems and yada, yada. And so what I was finding was that this was challenging. I could take three different, it challenged my view that I held at the time. So no matter how I looked at it, I couldn't make the view that I was holding at the moment line up with the view that was being presented to me, regardless of how I thought about it. So it could be, we just throw this one out, but that doesn't feel respectful to me. Or it was, the Buddha was wrong. Well, that doesn't feel quite right either. Or there was, science is wrong. And that one doesn't work for me either. And so all of the different ways that I could make sense of this didn't work. And what I'm finding is that the issue to me is not so much answering the question or solving the problem, but it's that sense that there's an unsolved problem, or there's the sense that things are not lining up perfectly, and I need everything to line up perfectly in order for it to be okay, in order to feel fulfilled and content with my religious path. And can you comment on that sort of deeper root to doubt as a mind state?
Yeah, doubt, the fifth hindrance is, it can just, there's no way to doubt yourself out of doubt. It just has this self-reinforcing quality to it. It's like an echo chamber that the more you kind of allow yourself to doubt, then the more it takes over. And whether it's questions about scriptural contexts or otherwise. But in terms of the scripture, I feel like the Buddha really does explicitly give one an out of that whole self-perpetuating doubt feedback loop, in that he says, I'm just giving the teachings and you don't have to take up these certain ones. Not every situation in life has, an enlightened Buddha giving you clear out that, you just don't have to believe this. It's not really essential. Pretty much every other instance of doubt really doesn't have that escape. So you have to, see if you can disengage in other ways. And I do find that doubt is a very ethereal and it's a very heady it'll give you a headache if you indulge in it too much. If you don't learn the tools to getting around it, but coming back into the body really can be a skillful way. Actually, I want to think about this, and is it this way? Is it not this way? It probably is this way, but then it says somewhere else that it's that way. And actually just, I'm going to come back to the mind in the heart or in the body. So that's one technique.
Did that address all in that a bit, Hasa?
Yes, thank you. And again, the beautiful Buddha Rupa.
Yes, yes.
Maybe you'll tell us where it came from. Maybe you won't.
It was in the attic, and someone gave it to me. No, I remember. This is from, sorry. When I left Thailand, I asked Longpo Anan, my teacher, if we could take a Buddha image, and he let us take this one from Thailand. And I wanted it for Clear Mountain from the beginning, so he blessed it. Okay. We do have to wrap stuff up now. So maybe we could read the blessing braid.
For Carol Jane, just recovering from COVID, please send metta. For Finley Grace, recent passings of father, paternal grandfather, and best friend, and COVID, please send metta. For Nanette, recovering from a medical procedure, spread care. For Betty Robnett, anniversary of death this week, spread care for a good rebirth wherever she is. For Mary Lee Hartzell, passed last week, please spread loving kindness. For Kyle, Kyle's wife died from cancer, please spend metta. For Gracie, Iwa's cat, passed away on Tuesday, please send metta.
Do we have other names that people want to bring into the space to hold? Anna, just diagnosed with brain cancer. Dave Arterburn, COVID, traveling, safe recovery. Jeff's mother, Bonnie, who just died last week. John's father, who died, I think, a month ago.
My cousin David died.
David, who passed away. Who? Tamira, who's recovering from COVID. Hasa Chitta, who's recovering from some physical problems as well. Who? Marisha Kate. John Church, terminal cancer. Luann died of cancer. Darlene, who died of cancer, and her husband Rahul, and daughter Mackenzie. Melanie, who just died of cancer. Gabe, too. So I hope people appreciate what it means to bring these names to mind. We forget them so easily, and what it means for the importance of cultivating care and just remembering we're practicing for the sake of, bringing a peace to our hearts that we can give to others. So let's hold all those people in our hearts now as we chant.